Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you guys for getting to the final video. Before we go into how to do the final touches, I just want you to let you know I am going to give this blend file over to for free on Gumroad. I'll have the link in the descriptions. Feel free to pay more if you want, but you can take it for free anyway. The only differences, we'll get into how to do this or some of the nuances in the video, but keep in mind I added a rain shadow strength, which will be explained later. The rain shadow, if you put this to 1, your computer may get pretty laggy. So you might want to keep it to 0. If your computer is still laggy, what you can do is under shading, go to your color, and instead of going through this, just mute it with M. And that should help out your computer. Anyway, let's get on to the video and finish up this shader. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome to the final episode of how to make a procedural planet in Blender. Today I want to show you how to make some more biomes and work on the rain shadow, which is a phenomena where one side of a mountain range is going to be more luscious than another. So first we want to, if we take a look at what we have currently, just make I changed the file a bit, so if we switch this over, so you can see currently we just have this kind of band going around the planet, and it doesn't really look that natural. We want to use, sometimes the hotter parts extend upwards, sometimes they go downward. I'm going to be using a similar tactic to what we did for the continents to get that look. What we're going to do is we're going to enter our topography and then our procedural height generation. And we are going to start off with a Voronoi texture. This is going to be 4D. It's going to be a smooth F1. We need this mapping node to go into the vector, then creating another group input. We plug the seed into W and the scale into scale. Detail is going to be 2, roughness 0.5. The smoothing we're going to put 0.239. These are just the values that I set up. As always, you feel free to play around with these values. So we're going to add a gradient texture, and if we connect this, we can put in the position into a vector. And you can see, well, you can see if we look at the vector. Oh, I apologize. This is supposed to be 2. So if you look at the gradient, we've got now the position data, and we're turning that into a black and white map. But we want to rough this up a bit more, so getting a vector math node. We're gonna pull this should be, it doesn't really matter, but we want to pull this noise node, or the mix of the noise node, into the add. Then we want to get another vector math and multiply. If you click one value and drag down, you could set this all to 1. And I forgot my screencast keys. Oh, there we go. And we want to put this down to 0.5. Well, let's mute that for now. I just want to show you what that's going to do. So we want the center to be a color and then the 2 poles to be a different color. So we're going to get our trusty color ramp. Divide it into, let's put the bottom number, the lower number, to 1. The middle number to black. And then I want to divide this up a bit more into quadrants, I guess. But I want these to be a little darker, so I'm going to put them about 0.336. And set this to ease. So you can see it's not quite lined up. And that is why we put this multiply here. So selecting all of these and pressing Ctrl J will frame them. Set this to procedural poles. And let's set the color to, set it to 0. Just to keep things consistent. So then we need to add a new output. So let's move this up a bit. And plug this into the poles. Now let's rearrange this a bit. We want to mix the, or switch between the simplified poles for our inputted textures. We can use our procedural poles, but if we're looking at our earth test, you see it kind of gives some weird results. You can keep this, but I personally think it looks a little strange. So I want to switch between our procedural poles and our kind of simplified ones. So you should add a new group input and a mix node. Just mix these together and use the height map switch. So you could see this one is using our simplified and this one is using our bit more complex one. So if we mute this, you could see we went from this kind of simple line to something that kind of ebbs and flows a bit more with the continental shelf. So now we want a little bit more complex colors. Right now we're just using 2 colors and then the mountains. So if we wanted to do this a bit more simply, what we would do is just add a color ramp, but I want a bit more control over it. I basically want to create a 3-way color ramp that I can mess with sliders. So the way you do this is the node will eventually have 3 inputs or value inputs. So just create 3 of those. These are going to just be temporary, and then 3 RGBs. It's not that important. What is important is we're going to have a map range, or 2 of them, and let's get this over. 2 mix nodes, or mixed colors specifically. We'll use, for now, land topography. Actually, let's move these down here and plug land topography also into this value. Then we're going to take this first value, plug it into the from min. Our second value is going to go into the from max, and the from min of the second map range, and then from max is going to be our third value. Then we're just going to plug these colors in like this and use our results to create our factors. So selecting all these, Control G. You don't need that reroute node now. The reason I created all those values is just so that all these inputs would have been made automatically. We can just rearrange things. I'm going to call this factor position 1, position 2, position 3, then A, B, and C, and plug this into the result. Now we no longer need these. And if we plug this into the hot biome, let's do the cold one. You can see you can modify this as if it's a color ramp. But this will allow us to access the colors and such. So I'm going to call this 3-way color ramp and name this specific one cold biome. Now you could choose whatever colors you want. For me, I found 195, 255, and 0.332 worked well. And then I chose some colors. This is basically just what looks good to me, but you can pick whatever colors you want. So let's make some space. We're going to want to duplicate this and change this to hot. Change up the values a bit more. The colors I chose for our warmer. Also, I decided to change this temperature a bit. This should be clamp. And so it looks a little strange because we're using our topography. I also want to modify the mountains a bit. So I'm going to add another color ramp. Let's set this to B-spline and add another black point. And this should be what you have. So I'm going to want to see the color separate from the ice color. So I want to create a second output just to separate these two, and then we can plug our ice color into here. So now we want to work on what I mentioned before, rain shadow. I should mention, if you want to stop here, because adding the rain shadow will take a lot of excess it'll be a lot more difficult to render, or your computer may slow down. So if you want to stop here, you can leave the colors more complicated or simple. You can also plug the poles into here. In fact, that may look better than plugging the topography into there. But we're gonna go ahead into our topography. Let's grab our input, a group input. Let's grab this node, our procedural height creation node. We're gonna plug our seed and scale into it. And of course, mix our height with our pre-made height. And we're going to grab a bump and plug this into height. Now, what the bump does is it, of course, gives us the data of the sides of the mountain, if that makes sense. Basically, we can extract the data that will tell us what one side of the mountain versus another. So if I do separate XYZ and look at this from above, you can see now that we're looking at the X, we can see the shading on the side opposite from X, and same with Y. However, weather patterns go in a circle. So here, go in a circle around the planet. So we don't just want one angle. We want a different direction for every single quadrant. So for this quadrant, we want it to go up. For this quadrant, left. This quadrant, down. And this quadrant, right. So it creates that spiral pattern. So to do that, first we need to be able to separate the sphere into quadrants. Let me just hide this. So we're going to need some room for that. First, we're going to grab our texture coordinate node, separate the XYZ out of the generated, and grab a color ramp node, plug the X into it, and set this to ease. So you can see that's giving us a value from 0 to 1. We're also going to need the inverse of this color. And let's group that, or frame that, and call it our X shadow. And we also need one of these for Y, and can label it as such. So now we're going to need 3 math nodes, 1 add and 2 multiply. Plugging the multiplies into the adds, then grab the 2 color ramps, plugging into the first multiply, then the 2 inverts into the second multiply. And if we temporarily add another color ramp, set it to constant and set this to 0.5, you can see it gives us quadrants. We are splitting it in half and then splitting it in half this way and multiplying those 2 together. So as you saw, this half is 0, this half is 1, this half is 1, and this half is 0. So therefore, when you multiply it, this quadrant will be multiplied by 1, and this quadrant will be multiplied on by 0, which will give us this same with over here, and then when you combine them, it creates the quadrant. So let's merge these together and label this mask. So as I was saying, we currently have the X and the Y. You can see this is getting the right side, but we're going to want to flip the opposite quadrant because currently it's only getting the X from this direction. So we're going to need to rotate the bumps specifically in each quarter. So to do that, we're going to need map range nodes, both set to smoother step, one for our Y and one for our, not what I wanted. You do not want them interfering with those. You just want them in between here. And then a combine XYZ, plugging them into the Z component. Now we're going to want to use pi to rotate this. So for this map range, it's going to be pi and 0. And here it's going to be 0 and a pi, just reversed. So now to rotate our bump, grab a mapping node, change it to vector, plug this into vector, holding Control Shift and then D will allow you to duplicate with the same inputs. And if we grab this and put it into rotation, you can see it will rotate pi around the Z. So basically, because it will take our 0 value, so this side, and rotate it pi, it will take our 1 side, our side with the value of 1 over here, and rotate it by 0. So if we take our separate XYZ, plug it in and look at our X, you can see it's now a mirror image of itself. Or it's not a mirror image, but it's getting the values from this direction and this direction, as opposed to from just one side. So we're going to do this with Y. And let's neaten this up. And now we are going to use the mask as our factor, put our X into A, and put our Y into B. Now this needs to be not clamped. So the reason why some parts of this are being a little too dark is because they're below 0 and Blender renders that as just 0. So we need to get another map range node. Specifically, it's going from -1 to 0, or -1 to 1. So all we have to do is that. Now grabbing all of this and framing it. We're going to call this rain shadow and plug the result of this into there. So now to pull that into our color, all we have to do is go into here, add a new input, rain shadow, grab our rain shadow and plug it into this one. just to keep all things neat and tidy. Then plug rain shadow into here. And now you can see, if we pull the color out of, just to make it easier, you can see just barely one side of our mountains are being made into a desert. If you want to make it a little bit more deserty, you can change these values. Something like that. Of course, you can always look at our Earth template to see how we're looking. And can even change the temperature. If you say want to add more dark parts. So I'm going to go back to the colors I had before. So now this is looking a little bit too sharp. So we want to blur this out a bit more. So we're going to do that in our procedural height map generator. And as you might expect, we're going to be using our handy blur node. We're going to want to add a blur amount input from the procedural modeling and plug this into both these vectors. So this should be 0 blurred, but we can put this one to 1. You see how that smooths it out a bit more? Now it's looking a little strange because we're using the wrong vectors. So what we need to do is go into our blur node. See, we're using UV instead of generated, but we still want to use UV for the pre-made map. So what we're gonna do is a mix node vector, plug generated into A, UV into B, and replace them here. Now we're going to create a new input for the factor, and let's call it generate versus or slash UV, and bring that value through. And then here we can take our height map switch. Now we need to invert it just because of the order we did things. But since it's a number, we can't use that invert node. So we're going to get a math node. The way you invert numbers is by making this subtract and change the first value to 1 and grab our height map switch. That's our second value, and plug this into here. And then up here we need to set this to 0. So we're also going to need a blurred, you can see for a pre-made map, we're also getting that really sharp values. So we're going to need a pre-made map for that as well. So making sure this one is selected just because we are now in the material instead of in our node. Just duplicate this. Ooh, we need to make a value for it, or a input for it. So let us make a new input. We'll call it blurred remade map. Also do it here. plug this into there. And let's just grab our blue node from here. Of course, this is going to be set to 1. So there we have it. This is pretty much the finished shader. Let's add a couple more values to here so we can extract them from the node at the end. I would probably put quick shader first. I'd put it on the shader, but computer's moving a little slow now. We can see it is working. Now that is a subtle transition. So again, we may want to go in and add a bit more deserty look. Something like that. It's not perfect. You'd have to go in and manually set up biomes yourself. But it's pretty close, and I think it creates something a little bit more realistic. And yeah, so we're fully done with this. As you can see, the continent seed still works. The scale of the continents, the sea levels, the temperature, and everything else. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know any other ideas you might have for things I could try. Maybe mimicking some 2D art styles, working more with procedural modeling, geometry nodes. We could work on more procedural shaders. I tried to make this one a little bit faster. Tell me what you think, any improvements I could make, and thank you for watching.